Hi, and welcome to D-Listers of History, a podcast and YouTube channel about interesting people you've never heard of who changed the world. My name is Fayge, and I am one of your co-hosts and your favorite public historian slash tour guide slash, I don't know, whatever I'm doing this week. So this is supposed to be a biography episode, but for our regular listeners, you know that my co-host and wife, Mizal, has been dealing with some illness stuff related to her chronic illnesses, and she's doing a lot better, but we may have overestimated how much work she could do catching up with everything that she had to catch up with after she got better. This is one of those unfortunate realities of chronic illness that periodically you get really, really sick for several weeks, and then everything piles up, and you've got to figure out how to catch it up. And so we just missed the deadline, basically. So I am instituting a new type of episode, which hopefully won't happen too often, but it's for these sort of like oops episodes so that we have something to release. And these are going to be D-list stories. And so this time I actually gave a tour on a boat on the Delaware River. And so I decided to video the whole thing and so that I could share it with you. So here's a little snippet from my super fun boat cruise. If you're interested in cruising on the Delaware River in a schooner, I will also include the link to the organization that hired me down below. And enjoy. We'll bring you your big long biography episode that you've been so patiently waiting for next Monday. I promise. Thank you so much. We appreciate you all so much. And enjoy.
Come with me. You could come with me.
In 1793, a new strain of yellow fever broke out in Philadelphia and killed about 10% of the population. How it got to Philadelphia is really like a really interesting winding story, though. If you're interested, I have a book recommendation. If you want to get the whole story, the book's called Ship of Death, and I forget the author's name, but he went around the world to all the archives that aren't digitized and stuff, and really put the whole story together. But the short version of it is there were a bunch of British people who said, hey, what if we colonized Africa but didn't steal land and people? Would that work? And so they went down and they tried to purchase land. Unfortunately, the land was claimed by two different groups of people. So that caused some problems. And they also didn't know what they were doing, which caused a whole lot of problems. And they were starving, and the old story of new colonists. And when they were starving, they started eating monkeys that had already died, which, pro tip, if you don't want to get any diseases or new fancy diseases or old-timey diseases, don't eat things that are already dead. No, don't do it. But they did that, and they got this really horrible new strain of yellow fever. And so they finally were like, we're done. We're leaving. 90% of the people have died. We're getting out of here. But because there was a war going on between Britain and France at the time, which is every 5 years there was a new war going on, they decided to head over to the West Indies, which is the Caribbean. And they ended up in what we now call Haiti, which at the time was in the middle of the only successful large-scale slave revolts. And what is now Haiti? They landed and they lied. You're supposed to fly a certain flag if a ship is quarantined, and they just didn't do that. And so they went off the ship and spread yellow fever around Haiti, which for the people who were revolting at the time, they realized was happening. And so they actually laid low in the mountains and just waited for all the white people to die, which works really well. It was really good. It was like biowarfare by accident. But a lot of people in Haiti were like, I see the way the wind is blowing on this revolt, and this is not looking good for us. So they got on ships and headed to Philadelphia, where they brought this strain of yellow fever to Philadelphia. The first cases showed up on Water Street, which is part of the oldest part of the city of Philadelphia. They were discovered by a doctor named Dr. Benjamin Rush. Dr. Benjamin Rush, if you know about medical history, shows up periodically. He's one of those people that, like, you look and you're like, if you look at it from our modern perspective, we're like, wow, that's horrible. But compared to what was going on before him was much better. So like he like brought the idea that maybe people with mental illness could be treated instead of like saying there's demons in their blood or something. Now the way he treated them, yikes. But, you know, take some steps. So he was the one who, he identified those cases of yellow fever. He thought they were because there was a pile of rotting coffee on the dock, which is obviously not where it came from. Yellow fever comes from mosquitoes. And in this case, it came from people fleeing from what is now Haiti. And it took a little bit for the city to figure out that there was something unusual happening, because yellow fever outbreaks were actually not that uncommon in Philadelphia and places south. It was sort of like flu season. Like, it was just kind of a thing that happened. But much like we just experienced, where it's like there's, you know, coronaviruses that are not COVID. It's just COVID was the new exciting thing. They decided to, it took them a little bit to figure out this wasn't just normal yellow fever. How they figured out it wasn't normal yellow fever is one day the Pennsylvania legislature walks out the door of the state house, and there's a person who has expired just lying on the steps. And then everybody, this is just the day. Everybody who was wealthy enough to do so left town, which meant a couple of things. It meant there was no government in Philadelphia or for the state of Pennsylvania. And this was 1793. So the federal government was here too. And they all left. So there was just no government for a little while there. And so somebody had to step up and take care of the people who couldn't just leave to go to their country estates. And that community was the free black community in Philadelphia. So Reverend Richard Allen and Reverend Absalom Jones, who were the ones who founded Mother Bethel AME Church, which is still there. You can go visit it. I highly recommend the tour. They decided that they were going to take care of the things that a government ought to take care of in the middle of an epidemic. So this came from sort of multiple sources. One, they were just like good people. But there was also this idea at the time, which was, I want to make clear before I say this, was super racist. But there's this idea that black people couldn't get yellow fever. Now, where this came from was down where the sugar plantations were in the Caribbean. Nobody lived long enough on these plantations to have children. So anybody who was down there had been brought from West Africa and had been exposed to yellow fever at some point in their life. That was not the case in Philadelphia. These people were born here. They had exactly the same amount of immunity as anybody else. And I'm sure that became clear to them relatively quickly. But they kept on at it, and they were going into people's homes and removing corpses and taking care of kids who lost their parents. They would put burn barrels on the streets to create smoke because they thought that smoke would get rid of the bad smells that was causing yellow fever. It doesn't. It might have helped with like keeping the mosquitoes away, maybe. But again, we were still figuring it out. Naturally, they got like 0 credit for doing this until more recently. But the free black community were really the heroes of yellow fever. And like I said, Philadelphia lost 10% of its population, which is incredible to think about, the impact that's going to have on society and on the economy and things like that.
What year was that again?
1793.
That was the worst epidemic. As far as we know.
I mean, percentage-wise, I think, but like, I'll be honest,
There's a lot of people.
I don't know enough about Philadelphia epidemics to say that. That's just the one I know.
Well, the cemetery. We're very busy.
Yes, actually. So a lot of the people who died in yellow fever are buried in Washington Square Park. So if you've ever walked around Washington Square Park, which is the park that's just to the south of Independence Hall, you've walked on yellow fever victims.
But they're not marked.
Oh no, they're not marked. And also the Arch Street Meeting House wasn't there yet. It was just a burial ground at the time. And they were talking about closing it because it was full. But then yellow fever happened and people were like throwing corpses over the wall. So they kept burying them. And then after that, they were like, okay, we're really done now. Good. Stop burying people here and put up a new meeting house, which they did. And that's the one that's there now. But all those people are still there too, totally unmarked because that was the tradition of the Quakers at the time, except one person is marked. I don't know what, no. I mean, he is marked, but he's not in their cemetery. I don't know why he's marked. There's just one guy who was like, no, I want this. So he's got it, but nobody else does.